Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, and more, including smaller deals that you can do without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest Podcast. Let's get started. Richard Parker has been helping people achieve their dreams of owning a business for over 30 years. His How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price program has sold over 100,000 copies in more than 80 countries. He was hired by the Dalio family office and for several years worked as a mentor to one of Ray Dalio's sons, teaching him about the art of buying small businesses. He has personally purchased 13 of his own companies, plus one co-investment, with the purchase prices ranging between $50,000 and over $200 million. He's appeared on Forbes, New York Times, Street.com, Entrepreneur Magazine, Inc., and has over 200 published articles to his credit. DealQuest audience, please welcome Richard Parker. Richard,
thank you. I'm doing great. Good to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Great to have you on. I mean, listen, nobody with that bio is going to question not only your credentials, but why I'm having you on the DealQuest podcast. Certainly not a mystery. But before we go there and talking about all your experience with deals personally, the programs you have for folks and what's involved in them, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm guessing a deal maker and somebody who provides courses and training for people on how to buy businesses probably wasn't it back then, but you tell me.
I wanted to be a player agent, actually.
Okay.
And I have somewhere, I should look around the office. I know I have it here. I had an article. I grew up in Montreal. There was a whole article written about me in the Montreal Gazette at that point because a buddy of mine who was 2 years younger than me was playing Little League Baseball, and the Montreal Gazette reporter showed up. I'll never forget his name, Bill Whitcomb. And he started talking to me and my buddy Howard Kleinberg. And I had a big mouth and I interjected and started answering questions. And the guy wrote a whole article about the smooth young operator in the circuit that was going to be a player agent. And that's really what I wanted to be.
That's too funny. Well, yeah. So listen, agents and deal makers in a different way, right? So I guess there was an element of that in there. That's funny. We have many, many more people who answer that question as wanting to be some sort of like baseball player or a smooth, but very, very few that, that age was going to be an agent.
Yeah, well, probably would have loved to have been a professional ice hockey player, but, realized that was probably a better path. So that's how my mind worked back then. Started my first business at 12. And so I guess I always had the entrepreneurial spirit in me or the deal making persona, if you will, and it just manifested itself in a different way, just a little larger. And as I look back, it's been a long time ago, but it's still fun. I still have the time of my life doing this stuff every day.
Love it. Love it. One other question looking back, what was your first deal of any type? Could have been something small when you were a kid, early in your career, whatever comes to mind. Your first thing you consider a deal.
Well, the first deal was actually when I was 12 years old. There was a newspaper in Montreal called the Sunday Express, which you could only pick up at the local store. They didn't have delivery. And I used to go pick it up for my dad, she rest in peace, every Sunday. And with snowstorms, whatever, is a real pain in the butt. But I used to pick it up. And then I called the Sunday Express and said to them, hey, you have to pick this newspaper up at the store. Why don't you have delivery? And I convinced them to give me the right to deliver these newspapers. So I went out and I sold a bunch of subscriptions and started they would drop off the newspapers because, again, they didn't have any home delivery prior to that. And they used to drop off a bunch of them. And I built up the route to, hundreds and hundreds of people. And then it became too much. So I kept 100 of them and I sold off different parts of the route to kids in the neighborhood. And I just took the 2 cents. It was sold for 15 cents. And Sunday Express paid you 2 cents plus you kept your tips. So I just kept the 2 cents because what happened was then the price of the news, people used to give you a quarter. So it sold at 15 cents. They gave you a quarter. You made a dime. Then the price went up to 20 cents. People gave you the same quarter. So my profits dropped in half. And I said, the hell with this nonsense. So I sold off all the routes to kids in the neighborhood. And I said, you keep all the tips. I'll just keep the two cents. And I was making like 25, 30, 40 bucks a week, which was crazy. This is like in 1973. So I always had cash walking around in my pocket. So that was the first business.
Love it. Love it. Love it. I've told my, teenage entrepreneurial stories before, so I won't tell them again, but yeah, it sounds very familiar. Trust me.
Right.
For me,
it's pretty common, right? It's pretty common.
Flyers door to door, as opposed to newspapers. It was advertising circulars in people's doors.
Perfect.
Yeah. Great stuff. Okay. So talk to me about, how did you get in, right? So we said in your bio, obviously, that you have this program for folks, teaching so many people across the world on how to buy businesses. You've done deals of your own. How did you get into the deal world? What's the background?
I got into my first business. I was 29 years old. I was working for a company. I made a horrible mistake and blew $60,000 in the stock market. And I was really in a hole. And it was when I quickly realized that I couldn't just change jobs. Where I was working, I was overpaid anyways. And so I couldn't get, another job better paying. And even if I did, it would be marginally more money. And recognize that I've got to put myself in a position where I don't have a limit on my upside. And so I decided initially to start something small. And shortly thereafter, within several months, I made my first acquisition. It was in the consumer products business. I was a manufacturer's agent, and I bought out another agent shortly thereafter. And within a reasonable period of time, within that first year of operations, realized, for me to grow this business organically is going to be too much of a challenge. I might as well just make some acquisitions, because I already made one small one. Looking back, I should have done it probably a little differently, but it wasn't a big mistake. But it worked out well, and said the quickest way to grow my business is just make some other acquisitions of companies that I could just tuck in and, add more products. I had a core group of clients. I was selling to big retailers in Canada. So I had a core group of clients, loyal clients. I said, I just got to find more products that I could sell to the same people. And so I started making some additional acquisitions of products or services that I could sell to the same people, and expanded. And in short order, bought a bunch of different companies, and my business started growing quite large. And one line that I took on, which was Sega Video, which exploded at the time. Nothing to do with me. I just happened to be in the right place. Dumb luck. Nothing else. Again, I take no credit for it. And my business exploded. And that's how I got into the world of deal making. Ultimately sold a number of the companies and relocated from Canada down to Florida in 1996.
Wow. So this is a question that I've asked others, but I'm particularly interested in it with you, because one of the things I often say is that I believe, mindset's the starting point for anything, right? Whether it's the jump from becoming an employee to becoming an entrepreneur, right? They're willing to take that risk. Some people have that kind of mindset. They're willing to do it. Some people will never do it. I don't have any judgment. Each should find their own. But I also have asserted that the mindset of a deal maker is also different. There are plenty of entrepreneurs out there, and some of them run very successful companies. They're not deal makers, right? They know how to market or sell or provide great products and services, but they focus on the organic growth side, right? And some businesses can be very successful that way. A lot of businesses, though, that do the best do some combination of organic. You have to be able to get a customer, a client, another one. If you can't do it organically, unless you're just an acquisition company, you're probably in trouble. But at the same time, there's this other way to grow, and it's not just M&A, but it's all types of deals. So for you in particular, I always am interested in deal makers' view on this concept of what is this deal maker mindset? How do you come about? And the reason why I'm particularly interested with you is I find I also, there's this concept that sometimes they call unconscious competence, right? So some of us are natural at something, whether it's being an entrepreneur, being a deal maker, it's negotiate, whatever it is. And we don't really know how we do it. But you teach people. And the minute we teach people something, we have to sometimes, that's when we figure out, oh, wait, I really do have a system to how I do this, right? I got to be able to articulate that system, or else I can't teach it to people. So with that big lead up, I'm really curious, because of that, your thoughts on the mindset of a deal maker, and how that, not only how you came to it, but was there a discovery process in that from unconscious to conscious, and then how does it affect your programs for folks that you're teaching?
Well, there's certainly a discovery process. I think when you talk about mindset, and I've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs, from small, individuals on Main Street, USA, through up to billionaires.
Yes.
And I think the deal makers, because you're right, there's a lot of people who acquire a business and they're good with that. And that's wonderful. And that thrills me, frankly, because I love to see people change their lives. And you have other people who become deal junkies, as I call them. Yes. And I think in the latter category, which I would include myself, I think there's a couple of things related to the mindset. I think we all love the journey as much as the kill.
Yep.
Getting a deal closed is very gratifying, but going through that whole process to get it closed, I think we find it, to me, I find it exhilarating, whether I'm doing it for myself on behalf of someone, buyer or sellers, because I do both side representation. And I think that I find that exhilarating because you have to really be on your A game all the time. And also from the acquisition standpoint, I find it incredibly intriguing when you're looking at a business that you may not have known even existed the day before. And then you have to really dig in, get your fingernails dirty, roll up your sleeves, and you become an expert in that business. And you don't have much time to become an expert. You have to learn about it in a real short order, enough to be able to make a decision, yay or nay, to buy the business. So I think the intellectual curiosity part of that is really important. And I'm not suggesting for a second that I'm intellectual, because I'm certainly not the smartest guy in the room. But the double click to that, if you will, is this thirst for learning. Yeah. And I think that's really, really important. So the mindset to me is a bunch of those different pieces. This, the deal junkie mentality, the hunt and the kill, this obsession with learning and this intrigue with learning because we find it fascinating. So I think all those things combined are really the mindset of a deal maker or someone who likes to acquire multiple businesses or what have you. The discovery for me, I don't think there was really one aha moment. That going into my first business was an aha moment. But as far as like a one particular aha moment, I want to do this for the rest of my life, I don't think that really ever happened outside of the fact that I just really enjoy this universe.
Yeah.
And so why would I get away from it? I mean, there's just, everything is new. I find it fascinating. And the ability to morph into teaching others to do the same thing to me was just a byproduct of that, because I've been so blessed in my life and then being able to help other people. And certainly at this stage in my life to be able to, extend that to teach people how to do it. Because I didn't start off with a lot of money. I mean, my first acquisition basically with $30,000, which I just did the calculation recently. It's like 75 grand in today's dollars. And my life has been changed. I mean, I would have never been able to predict back then. So being able to help other people do exactly what I've been able to do has been incredibly gratifying.
And one last thing on the mindset. Is there any additional thoughts when you think about the people you teach and train and whatever, the ones who are successful or less successful or actually take action versus just, because listen, I know many people who I run programs on negotiating. I know a lot of personal growth traders, a lot of business traders, whatever. And the amount of people who sit in a room and gather information versus the amount of people who actually act on it is often very, very different. So anything in that mindset conversation around, those people who actually take it on versus don't?
It's a binary question because I've gone through this for 20 years. It's very simple. The people that need to do something get it done. The people that want to do something, not so much. So when people have a need to buy a business or adjust their thinking to the point of saying, I need to buy a business. In other words, I'm not willing to do what I've been doing up to this stage of my life on a professional level. I'm just tired of it. I'm not willing to do it anymore. I need to do something. Those people, on the whole, get to the finish line. Yeah. The people who wake up and say, I want to buy a business. Well, some of them will, most of them won't. So it's the need versus want is the clear distinguishing factor, like no doubt about it from my perspective.
Yeah, I get that. And what I'm hearing is, and tell me if I'm off, is that the need, the need can be an internal driving dissatisfaction. It doesn't have to be like some outside force, but it becomes at the level of a need as opposed to just a want or a desire, right?
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't have to be a need, and there's different needs. Some are financial, some is, in other words, to replace or generate an income. Some is I need to do this because I'm not willing to keep working for something, for someone I need to do this because I'm working 100 hours a week for someone and I'm not getting paid accordingly. Others look at it and say, hey, I need to do this because I need to structure my life in a way that I can spend more time with my family. I can take more vacation time, put myself in a position that I don't have an upside. But if you were to draw a Venn diagram of all of that, need would be in the middle.
Yeah.
People have different needs, but need would be the hub of all of it.
Yeah. Got it. Great. So in terms of specifically this, how to buy a business at good business at a great price program, talk to us a little bit about it, how that's delivered, what it looks like, and also who the ideal client or person for that program is.
So start with the last question, which is the ideal client is anyone who's thinking about buying a business or franchise, and even to a certain extent, people that are considering starting one, because I think we, in a very good way, paint the picture to people that buying an existing business with a track record is infinitely better because you bypass the whole startup phase and like 96% go out of business in the first 5 years. And the cost of acquiring a good business is generally not much more expensive than a startup if you're going to do it right. And so that's the ideal client, anyone who's thinking about going into their own business. That's the one thing. The second point is how it's delivered. We deliver everything by download. It's a 548-page guide, plus tons of ancillary resources, interactive resources. We have a proprietary valuation software program that we developed using, it was a little over 1,000 successful business transactions and a few unsuccessful ones, and really put together a valuation program that takes 50 fundamentals, core fundamentals of the business, not just the financials, into place, marries it with the number and generates a valuation. And so that's how it's delivered. And the whole goal of the program is step by step. Buying a business is not difficult, but it's complex. And when something's complex, you got to reduce it to bite-sized pieces. And I always equate it to, I put together a few propane barbecues in my time. And every time, like, you get this thing, it's in a box, and there's conservatively like 300 pieces in this thing, right? But if you lay out all the parts in order and you put the instruction guide in an accessible place and you organize the parts and the pieces and you start from the bottom up, you eventually you have your propane barbecue. But if you just look into the box and say, my God, I'll never be able to do this. So the concept of this program is the same thing. It's all based on modules, 23 steps in the business buying process, from the first step being what to consider. Like, should you even be doing this, straight through to the last piece being your post-purchase priorities. And in between that, there's 21 steps, from timing, getting organized, dealing with brokers, where to look. Critically important is this third chapter, which is determining what business is right for you. And then getting into negotiation, valuation, due diligence, evaluating personnel, gathering information, sellers to ask the questions. So it's a module-based program, step by step, very digestible. I write like I talk, and it's very, I don't want to say it's dummied down. It's because it's not. It's just very simple. And it also explains to people that they're going to go through emotions during this whole process and how to deal with that, because there are ups and downs. It's not just pixie dust and unicorns. And so how do you deal with the setbacks and the times where you feel like, oh my God, like I don't know if I can keep moving forward, because there are some low points and deals fall apart or you get rejected. And so it talks about, it's a combination of aptitude and attitude.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I mean, what a great resource, folks. Listen, it's like anything else. Talk about the mindset, talk about with entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs, they conceptually understand the reason for or the potential benefits of deals, but they're in that place of how do I get started, right? Or they're looking to buy businesses. I mean, that was a while back. I don't have the episode number in front of me, but I had Richard Marks on, who's a banker who mainly funds searchers looking to buy business, right? And so he gets SBA loans for searchers who are looking to buy business. And so that conversation, okay, right. He's helping them solve one potential thing, which is getting funding. But what is it that takes somebody to even become a searcher, or they decide, hey, whether they're a corporate refugee, these like military folks sometimes are, in that category, right? They're getting out of, I have some friends or relatives who put their 20 in the military, and now it's like, and some of them go into government jobs, but some of them, right, want, and they have no idea, right? They have no idea what to do, right?
Yes.
So it's, it's great that you have that resource. What other, you mentioned sell side, buy side. What other services, if any, are you providing to who outside of the educational programs?
So I still do some sell-side representation. I do this as much to keep myself busy. I work on a couple of deals a year, and I enjoy the process. It's not done from a financial perspective. I just really enjoy it. So I have, I've been doing this for a very long time. So I have deal flow. If I reject a lot more than they take on, I just like to deal with people I really like and really trust and enjoy. Yes. And I know I'm going to enjoy the process with them. So I handle a few of those. On the buy-side representation, what I found before the research that I did for my course was one of the big things that became very apparent with individuals. I spoke with hundreds of buyers and people and business owners and sellers and attorneys and accountants, people who succeeded, others that failed, and especially on the ones that failed, or buyers that acquired businesses and made mistakes, was the one thing that was very common to all of them was they would have loved to have someone to hold their hand through the process. and someone who is really an unbiased advisor. And I do some brokerage work, so I'm not disparaging brokers. I'm in that world, but the reality is people don't realize that business brokers are not your unbiased advisor. They want, their agenda is to sell you a business, and may not be the right one, but that's how they feed their families. And that's cool. I'm not judging them. That's cool. But this concept of having like a Sherpa or a real guide for somebody, and that became shining through. And my agenda was really just to help people. I mean, I never thought it would turn into a business. We sold 100,000 plus copies. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me. So one of the things that we do as part of it, which takes up the bulk of my time and I love doing, is I provide free consultation to anyone who buys the materials. I never charge them. So they can email me. We give them great responses. When they're in the throes of a deal, we could be spending time on the phone together, and I'm their standby advisor. And so that's a huge part of the time that I spend, and I love doing that. So that's a really large part of the services or other things that I do, because it's, I probably answer 100 emails a day.
Yeah, got it. Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can tell you about an incredible resource my team and I have put together for you. Secrets of Deal-Driven Growth, Creative Ways to Grow Your Business, Even in Challenging Times, is a powerful ebook that helps you take DealQuest podcast episodes and apply them to your own life and business. This is the ideal tool for anyone looking for creative ways to grow as deal makers, and you can get yours now. It's as easy as heading to CoreyCupford.com/workbook and downloading your copy. While you're there, you can also consider joining our dynamic deal-driven community of founders, experts, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. Now back to the show. All right, so I want to go back and start talking about some of the deals that you've done for two reasons, because obviously, doing deals, there are always lessons. You said 1,000, you weren't talking about yours, but you're talking in general, what you gathered for your course, 1,000 that worked and the few that didn't. I don't know a deal maker who doesn't have, nobody's batting 1,000, right?
Nope.
No matter how smart, no matter how good you are, whatever. In fact, part of the process is that if you're not willing to take a risk on having a loser or one that's just okay or whatever here or there, then you're not going to get the winners either, right? So talk to me a little bit about some of these deals that you've done, sort of lessons learned, and then obviously, for me, that gives you much more credibility to the course, to the program you have, because, listen, it gets overplayed. But, there's that old disparaging comment about those who, teach can't do and those who do don't teach. And I think there are significant exceptions to that, but I do value somebody who's teaching somebody who's actually done it themselves.
Right. Yes.
As opposed to, especially in this world, because deals are not academic. They're real world, on the ground, personalities, businesses, industries, economies, like this, the theory only gets you so far. So tell us a little bit about these various deals that you did, ones that worked, ones that didn't work, some lessons learned.
So it's great questions, because one of the things that you touched upon is real world experience. And with the internet, there's just the proliferation of people allegedly teaching people how to buy business. These self-anointed gurus, most of whom have never bought a business before, or misleading, misguided information about buying business, good businesses, great businesses, they tell you, for no money down or whatever. I mean, it's complete BS. It's nonsense. And unfortunately, people fall for it, and they spend thousands and thousands of dollars, and someone just ruined someone else's hopes and dreams. So I think it's disgusting. And that's part of my motivation and obligation to really get out there in shows like this to spread the good word of what's real and what happens in the real world. And so from my own perspective, the one thing that I learned is, I learned something new in every deal. I mean, I've been involved with hundreds and hundreds of them, but I still don't know everything by any means. And I learned something new in every deal. I will tell you that the deals that really crap the bed for me personally are the ones where I learned the most. And it's what you take from those lessons, and from all the business that I acquired and made. If anyone tells you they didn't have any bad deals, they're either not doing enough deals, right? Or they're full of it. So that's a few of them, plenty. And the thing that I learned from the good ones, the bad ones, there are some common things. And part of this became the genesis of what I teach and preach, is the single most important thing that you've got to do in this is if you're going to be an owner operator, is you've got to match your greatest skill set to what drives the revenue and profits of a particular business. If you do that, you can do an average job on the rest of the whole transaction. Like, you can overpay a little bit, you might miss something in due diligence, no catastrophes, of course, but you could do an okay job on the rest of the stuff. But if you don't get that piece perfect, you're going to be in trouble. Similarly, if you get that right, you're going to flourish. right? Yeah. So that became like the pinnacle of the learning, is identifying the right business for you. Now, the right business doesn't mean it's a good business. It means that it's the right business for you, because there's lots of good businesses, but if they're run by the wrong person, they'll go bankrupt in a year. And similarly, there's lots of good businesses run by the wrong person now. But if you've got the right skill set for that, you fundamentally should be able to improve it drastically. And so that was probably the greatest learning from all the deals. And I've done so that's really important. When I stuck to areas that I knew, I was okay, or did well. When I got into other areas, I failed miserably. And I guess you call it failure, or failed well, because I learned from them. And there's two things that I was able to extract from them. Was I was able to put together what I call my 5 golden rules, which I teach people, that the 5 things that they should have in place of any business they consider purchasing. And they're all personal. So I've been able to evolve those to what I've been able to learn over the years. For example, in one business that there was no demand in place. It was a tremendous product. It was in the golf industry, a video golf business. And I was actually working for this company, more so I didn't acquire it, I was working for them. And we went public as a chief operating officer, but there was no demand. We had to create demand, and it was way too expensive. You just couldn't educate the masses enough. And that became a golden rule of mine, along with 4 others, which I'm happy to share if you'd like. So when you get into certain deals, like one of them, we acquired this retail merchandising company. I was in the consumer products business. I knew that when I would sell my products at a big retailers in Canada, and I started going to the stores, and I'd never see my stuff on the floor. Like, it was stuck in the back room, because all of them were going to a self-service model, because labor was becoming so expensive, and stuff was never being put out onto the floor properly. And so I ended up acquiring a small retail merchandising service company in Eastern Canada. They actually came in as partners. And then we expanded that model out and started servicing retail stores across the country. We had 200 people. We grew that business from, it wasn't even 6 figures, to $4.5 million. And just to give you some context, 10% of the population in Canada. So that's like a $45 million business in the US. And that's 30 years ago. And that was really the application of form to function, realizing it's not good enough to just sell my product to a client. I have to make sure that product works for them. And works for them means they sell it through the door, through the consumers. So that was really good learning. On ones that I failed, sorry, go ahead.
On that one, I just want to hop in, because on that one, it really illustrates something that I often say. And in fact, I'm going to be in Singapore in April at the Global Leadership Conference for Entrepreneurs Organization. I've been an EO member for a long time, and I'm the My EO Deal Exchange champion. So we do a conference, deals conference for EOs every year. And at the Global Leadership Conference, I'm doing some talks, and the talk is going to be like, a lot of people think of the deal first, right? And they're like, oh, M&A, I know how to do it. I don't know how to do it, whatever it is, right? The talk is actually not going to come from that perspective. It's going to come from, what is your business problem, frustration, issue, or opportunity that you're not taking advantage of? Okay. Well, that business problem was, we have merchandise that's not getting out to the floor, right? Well, now you could try to solve that business problem organically by talking to the stores, trying to encourage the store managers or whatever to put it on the whatever, right? But what you did was you said, hey, what kind of deal can I do to help solve this, right? I'm going to partner with, or, acquire, whatever that looked like, with this company that you mentioned, and we're going to go solve that problem. So the reason I wanted to stop you and illustrate that was that my assertion to our listeners, and it's going to be the topic of my talk in Singapore, is let's start with whatever the business problem or frustration is that you have not been able to solve, right? Hiring is a great one. Tough to find talent these days. Well, sure, go through your recruiters, post it online, do whatever. But if you have trouble finding talent, have you considered whether you can acquire a company's? There are more acquisitions these days that are driven by talent acquisition more than anything else, more than the technology, the assets, even the client list for some of these companies, because that's a problem to be solved. So I just wanted to highlight something that you did, which is that you saw a problem and went to an inorganic, deal-driven solution for that. And
yes.
I just want to help people think on how that might apply in their lives as well.
And there really are applications to almost any of the problems. In our case, not only did we really just took control of the situation, say, we have to solve this because no one else is solving it. The retailers weren't solving it. The other thing that we were able to do, because it was such a good solution, we then went out to other companies that were selling these retailers and said, here's what we're going to do for you. Sure. And they put up a huge resistance. So we couldn't get any contracts. So what we did was we said, you know what, we're doing this ass backwards. Why are we going to them to tell them we're going to help them, even though they knew it was a problem? By us providing that service, it would cost them a lot more money, shrink their margins. We went to the retailer and said, hey, it's not just us. You got 500 other suppliers that have the same problem as we do. Why don't you go to the suppliers and you force them to do the servicing? Yeah. So you know what? They were all pissed at us, and grudgingly brought us on board. But here's what happened. Once they realized that their sales exploded, they didn't realize how much they were leaving on the table. Their sales exploded as a result. Because you know what? No matter how good your product is, if you don't put it in front of the consumer, it's meaningless. And so it took a little time. We aggravated a lot of people. The retailers loved us because their sales were going up. The merchandise was on the floor. At events, they were getting the product. And slowly but surely, the suppliers came on board. We ended up servicing thousands of stores across the country for many, many different suppliers, and turned into it was a wonderful business. A lot of logistics, but a wonderful business.
Yeah, love that. So you were about to go on to some other things, learning from deal failures and stuff like that, when I so rudely interrupted you. Yeah,
you didn't rudely interrupt, jump right in. So I could talk about this all day and I get very excited. So another one I actually acquired, it was in the retail sector. And it was a concept related to ladies' shoes, one price shoes. We bought out all manufacturers. I partnered with someone. They were huge in buying out the end of season closeouts from all the major manufacturers. Yeah. Because in the ladies' retail shoe business, the shoes that you see at Bloomingdale's or Macy's for $80 and the ones higher up for $300 coming off pretty much the same line with some minor adjustments. So they were buying these ends of lines of shoes, and we were able to go in. This company was buying hundreds of thousands of pairs, and they were doing it through retail and wholesale. I love this concept. So I partnered with them. We opened up a massive store in West Palm Beach. So about 12,000 square feet at 60, 70,000 pairs, selling women's shoes at $888, $1288 that you would see at Bloomingdale's and Macy's for $50, $60, $70, $80. And we were hit, and we spent a lot of money promoting it. I was working in the business because I really wanted to learn it, which was important to me. Before we even opened up, the lineup around the block the first day was great. We made money we made money the first day. Wow. But one of the things that I learned in there, or actually there's a couple things. Number one, we went through 100 people to find 15 good staff members. That was number one. Number two, we couldn't get the concept. We didn't believe the concept would travel. In other words, our goal was, and I went in this with a partner, I said, well, the goal is to roll out 10 to 20 stores quickly. Like, let's get the one right and then roll out a bunch of them. And we didn't feel we could get the model to roll out because it was so demanding related to personnel and the management in place. You had to have top tier people besides who worked on the floor. You had that amount of pairs. You had to help clients. We had the shoes stacked, floor to ceiling, beautiful location, well organized, but everything was on the floor. You didn't run back to get the pairs in the back. And then we realized this won't travel. This concept is just not going to travel unless we duplicate our managers so effectively, and we didn't feel that we can do this because of the high level service that we provided. So the lesson learned in there was, when you have a business that's related to talent and employees, and most are, but not all, but most are, because sometimes there's an augmented level of talent. When it's related to an augmented level of talent, you have to make sure that you can acquire those people, bring them on board, train them properly. We did, but the effort was overwhelming, and said we couldn't just have a store 200 miles away and feel confident that could be duplicated. And we didn't want to water it down. Like saying, we can't have a case where the 5 locations where we are great and the other ones just are like 80% of it or 40% of it, because then you really hurt your brand. So the lesson learned there was, when you're getting into a business where talent is so important, like you talked about acquisitions for talent only, is you have to make sure you have the ability to do that. And I didn't do that very well. So that was a terrific lesson. Like I said, it's very easy for me to go on and tell you about the Grand Slams, because I had a few of those, but the lessons learned were really, really from the ones that didn't work out well.
Yeah. And that's a common theme that, I know anybody who, whether it's DealMaker, whether it's entrepreneurship, and you mentioned smart failing or whatever you call it. I forgot what you did.
Fail well.
Fail well, yeah. Fail well.
Feeling well.
The other one I like sometimes is fail forward fast.
Yeah. You want to fail fast. That's always less painful.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Forward, right?
And forward.
Well, right. So and listen, not everybody's willing to do that, right? I mean, and again, no judgment, but that's why know thyself. I mean, are you willing to be that kind of person? And then, like you said, the know thyself piece you pointed out is aligning with the right kind of business that fits with your particular interests and skills. I often talk about this concept of highest and best use, right? And ideally, we're all in our highest and best use area. I'm not talking about in terms of personal growth, but in a business, I'm going to overstate it a bit, but I largely don't believe working on your weaknesses. I believe
I'm with you 100%.
Double, triple, quadruple down on your strengths, and then build systems and team and other people who are strong and,
absolutely. Work on your weaknesses when you're working for someone else.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when you go into your own business, that's not the time to bolster your weakness. You have to make sure that you can hire for that, but you have to focus on your greatest strength. And because that's not the time to be working on your weaknesses, because that's not where the business is going to be able to grow. As a matter of fact, if you have too many weaknesses, certainly if what drives the business is not a strength of yours and potentially even a weakness, you're going to get into trouble in a hurry. So weaknesses are great and you should work on them in time with the proper allocation of time. But when it comes to acquiring a business, that's not the time to be doing it.
Right.
At all.
Yeah, no, I love it. I always say, for me, I always say there's 3 elements of what I call highest and best use. One is that it's got to be something that you're great at. But the joke I say is I'm really good at drafting documents as a lawyer. I haven't drafted, I have people for that, right? Because I'm not passionate about it. I also want to be passionate about it. Now, high level strategy structuring, okay, yes, that I'm passionate about. But there's got to be another piece, and it goes to what you were talking about. I think it aligns with what you're talking about in terms of this. And people miss this. They think, oh, wow, I'm great at this and I love doing it. But it's got to be highly leveraged. It's got to move the needle. It's got to make a difference, right?
Yes, amen to that.
And that's similar to what you're talking about. And I'm amazed that often people miss that. It's like, no. And this goes down to that double and tripling down. Like if you get that right as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a leader, and you're able to say, this is what I'm great at, this is what I love, but this is also what moves the needle, what I can uniquely do that actually nobody else on my team can do, right? They can do all that other stuff, which is, by the way, a bigger universe of stuff that I'm not good at or don't want to be doing, right? But this is the thing that is my special sauce, and this is what's going to really move the needle. Those are the entrepreneurs and business owners that are most successful.
Absolutely. It's what drives the business, what I'm great at. And one thing you mentioned, which I'll push back on a little bit when you talk about people, what they're good at and what they're interested in. People get very confused because what you're interested in or what you like doing oftentimes is not what you're really good at. And so,
that's true.
And sometimes the interests cloud your judgment about what is your greatest skill set. And that's why for some people, they can identify it right away. For others, they have to go, outside of their own little bubble and speak to colleagues and former bosses and even clients or whomever and get input, because what people like to do is usually what they spend their time on, but it doesn't mean what they're really good at doing. And so that gaining that clarity is so important. I mean, can't even overemphasize how critical that is, because that's what's going to really move the needle. It's like, what was that movie with Liam Neeson when he Taken, when he talks, I have a very specific set of skills, right? That's the way you got to look at it. Like whatever that skill is, I'll find you and I'll kill you, right? Or whatever he said. And that's the way you have to look at that specific set of skills. Other people may have it, but that is your greatest skill set.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, when I say you have to be good at it and you have to be passionate about it, but I love that point that you're passionate about something could give you a false,
it's overrated passion.
You have to be objectively good at it, right?
But objectively good at it. Yes.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great point. Great. So anything else? We're coming to time, so I'm going to come to my last 2 questions. But before I get there, because I feel like, listen, with folks like you who've been in this world, and I'm such a deal guy as well. Like we could do a 10-hour podcast, but we're not, right? We're not going to, we're not going to do that.
Put a few people to sleep, right?
Yeah. So we got to pick and choose here. But before I ask you my last 2 questions, is there anything else, whether it's about let's do this before you mentioned the golden rules thing, right?
Yes.
But why don't you share those with us before I ask you my final 2 questions?
Sure. And these are my 5. They're not applicable to anybody, but it's important to have your 5, and they could evolve as you're learning about different businesses and going through the process. And it's involved for me, but I will only buy a business that has 5. I'll never buy one that has 4. So for me, it's as follows. Number 1, the business has to be sales and marketing driven because that is my greatest strength. Number 2, the business has to have high margins. And the reason for that is I don't really care about the revenues because I'm comfortable with my skills in sales and marketing. So if the margins are high, as long as I'm able to drive the revenue, the profit is going to follow by default. Yeah. The third thing is I like an element of exclusivity in a product or service that I'm selling, whether it be a territory, geographically, whatever the case may be, but it's some element of exclusivity to the product or service that's being offered. The fourth thing is I want a business where demand is in place. And I talked about that earlier, and I learned that the hard way. Creating demand is much too expensive and darn near impossible in most cases. So demand's got to be in place. And the fifth one is I want a business that does not compete on price. I don't believe that is a sustainable business model because you have to go back into business every single day. Yeah. And so those 5 in sales and marketing driven, element of exclusivity, high margin, demand in place, and not competing on price, those are unbreakable 5 golden rules of mine that are been a tremendous guiding principles. And so for people that are looking to acquire business, what I teach them is how I came up with mine, but how they need to come up with theirs and understand at the beginning they may not know. And it's very important to be specific. In other words, you can't say, one of your rules can't be, I want to enjoy what I do. Well, of course, everybody does. But how do you know that? And it really, that's meaningless. Yeah. And if you dig into that and say, well, what's the root of that? Well, they say, well, I want to enjoy what I want to do means I want to work somewhere related to product or service for kids. Well, now you're starting to get close. So one of your rules will be is the product or service has to be geared towards children. So that's how we get to the 5 golden rules because we don't want them generic. We want them really, really specific. And then you could put each business through that test on 2 levels. One, is my greatest skill set going to be the driving factor of that business? And second to that, does it meet my 5 golden rules? Because if it doesn't comply to both, you got to walk.
Yeah, I love that. It's fine. I've been interviewing we're growing, fortunately, to hire another attorney. And I've been interviewing. And one of the things that you do in an interview, obviously you're interviewing other people, but I want people to understand the philosophy. And I have a very clear vision and philosophy on the way I run my firm that's different from a lot of the firms. The reason I left big law practice many, many years ago, like you, it's been 30, whatever years since I've been doing this. But, and one of the things, it's not the only one, but one of the resonates to me is I knew I never, and this isn't in connection with acquisition, but it's a similar process to determine who you are in business, right? Whether you're acquiring it or whether you're creating it. For me, I never, in the early days when I first started on my shingle and was paying my rent off credit cards because I had no clients and it was doing everything you weren't supposed to do because I worked in big law and big law discouraged you from developing your own business. And I was only less than 6 years out of school when I said, I can't do this anymore. And I got, and I hung out a shingle. And probably if I knew better back then, I would have, acquired a law firm, but also law firms back then, there were issues with.
But the smart thing is you got the hell out of there.
I did. Yeah. But, one of the things that I got very, very clear on early on is that I did not want to be in any kind of low margin commodity type part. And you have that, people are doing residential real estate closings at no money. And I'm like, how do you, my interest, my desire, my skill set, my need to service clients in a certain way did not allow me. I mean, yes, you can create a business that is a real estate closing mill where you have systems and a bunch of paralegals and you barely look at a file and it's like any other volume business, right? You make low margins at a high volume. It just did not align for me. Everything, and we don't do any residential real estate anymore, but that was that early mentality was like, no, I want a higher end, higher margin, customizable, more personal service kind of business. And so it's just, I'm personally relating to what you're telling people.
Right.
In terms of looking at it, because, and I agree with you, by the way, I don't like a rush to the bottom on price. I think it's a bad business model, but there are some, Walmarts or whatever, there are some companies that have figured out that model and they win at it, right? And it's fine,
but they could do it at scale, right? They could do it at scale.
Final 2 questions. The first one is just that people find out more about your program, everything else, any place you want to send them to go.
Yeah, the easiest place is go to richardparker.com. We have lots of, tons of free articles, free reports. The course that we offer is available there as well and explains the details of that. And we sell it what I believe is a very reasonable price for under $200. But if you can get lost in the world of learning about buying businesses on richardparker.com, tons of great articles broken down by different steps in the process, and people will find that very helpful.
Great. Excellent. And that'll be in the show notes if you're driving. So whatever, definitely check it out. My final question on the podcast, Richard, is always about my highest value in life, my highest ideal, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom around the world for people from oppression to why I've been an entrepreneur and I've had a boss for decades. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think at the high level, it'd be very easy to say to be able to do what you want to do when you want to do it. But I think that's pretty generic.
Yeah.
So to me, there's an offshoot to that, which is the freedom to be able to have options and to make some real good choices that you could impact the lives of others. And I don't want to sound too altruistic, but that's really important to me. And when I say the impact the lives of others, it's not just in the business sense, it's in family sense and what have you. And I think about it, playing ice hockey for, 58 years. My son was a high-level hockey player, played junior in Massachusetts. We're a hockey family. I probably watched 300 games a year. And I find that there was the example that I give to people, which really impacts me related to freedom, is this one hockey player, Sidney Crosby. And he's one of the greatest players ever. And I'm sure you're familiar with him. But, the one thing that he does is makes everybody, when they bring up a new player, they always put him on his line. And the thinking is, if you can't succeed playing with Sidney Crosby, okay, you don't have like a hope and a prayer, right? And so, because it's very different than what most coaches think. They bring players up, they put them on the bottom line. They always put the player on the first line, give a rip. And what he does is he makes everybody around him better.
Yeah.
And so I look at freedom to say, giving me the ability to make people around me better, whether it be in my personal relationships, my business relationships, the materials that we provide, the work that I do. It's really all encompassing. And I think that comes with options, and that you're able to make some of these choices, because it's not all about money by any means. It helps, but there are other options available and how you could impact life. So to me, the freedom is really the ability to impact in a lot of areas. And hopefully that makes sense to your question.
No, it 100% does. And I identify with it because, being of service, which is the way I often phrase it, is significant, to me. And again, I'm of service in a way that is, philanthropic, but I'm also, it's a fundamental core of, in my law firm and whatever. And you're right. I don't think, it's not, in fact, I think the more service you are, the more financial reward you actually get, right? Because if you don't come from the money, if you come from a service mentality, then that's what attracts, people and, to you. So I totally, I totally get it. So
yeah, I agree with you. I think if people's heart is in the right place, if you start out with helping and not with some BS saying this is what we're going to do, but to really believe it to your core, And I was asked recently about some of the successes that people that I've worked with have achieved. And the answer, and very similar to this, is, the people that I've worked with, and I've worked right up to billionaires, people who've had massive success, on a lower level, but also like crazy massive success in business. It seems like none of them ever care about the money. It's always like they're just obsessed with building a great company, empowering people and what have you. Because if you're in a situation where there's an economic benefit, and your goal is, I just have to figure out how to help the world who we're going to deliver this product or service to, the money is going to follow by default. It's inescapable. And so having that higher level, and again, it's not this just BS mission, it's really to your core and in the company's culture and fabric and DNA, believing that, if we get up every morning to help people, ultimately it's going to keep the lights on.
That's right. 100%. Richard Parker, thanks for being such a great guest on the DealQuest Podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. The Deal Den is a place where entrepreneurs, high-level executives, and business leaders come together, support each other's growth and success, and share what's working best, as well as what challenges we are facing right now. You will get input not only from me, but from all of our members. We collaborate and serve each other. To join us, go to coreycupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.